Introducing Mexico, Part 2, The People. More than 85 million people call Mexico home. Because Mexico's population has grown very rapidly during the second half of the 20th century, many of today's Mexicans are children and teenagers. Although the Mexican population includes elders who have witnessed astonishing changes during their lifetimes, the vast majority of the country's people were born after 1940. Recently, the rate of population growth has declined somewhat because many young couples are having smaller families than in the past. Already, however, Mexico's large population increase, along with pressures for modernization, have had profound impacts on the land and on the lifestyles of its people. Once a predominantly rural nation with many subsistence farmers, Mexico has become increasingly urbanized as people from rural areas have moved to large towns and cities. In 1940, when Mexico had a population of about 20 million, only a quarter of these people lived in settlements of 5,000 or more. Today, the countryside supports almost twice as many farm families as in the past, but because of the vastly increased population, more than two-thirds of all Mexicans live in communities larger than 5,000. More than 100 Mexican cities have populations greater than 50,000, and 20 have populations exceeding 250,000. Urban areas with more than 1 million residents include Acapulco, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Puebla, Tijuana, and Mexico City. The nation's capital, Mexico City, is by far the largest urban center with a metropolitan area population of more than 20 million. This means that approximately 1 out of 5 Mexicans lives in this gigantic city. Naturally, urbanization has affected ways in which Mexicans make a living. Approximately 1/4 of the workers still gain a livelihood from farming, forestry, or fishing. Many others are employed in manufacturing and construction. The remainder have a variety of occupations in the fields of transportation and in providing goods and services. Mexico's people have a rich cultural heritage. The Olmec people, who developed an advanced civilization based on agriculture, lived more than 2,000 years ago. The Mayas of southern Mexico and Yucatan built magnificent cities during the first millennium AD. The deeds of Mayan kings were recorded in hieroglyphic writing on stone slabs called stelae. Priests and kings also ruled over central Mexican cities during the same period. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan covers a greater area than the largest pyramids of Egypt. During the 10th through 12th centuries, the warlike Toltec peoples ruled a vast empire from their capital city of Tula. Toltec power apparently extended southward to the Yucatan Peninsula. Many of the symbols found at Chichen Itza in Yucatan repeat the themes glorified at Tula in central Mexico. The Toltec Empire faded in the late 12th century. By the time Spanish explorers and adventurers reached Mexico in the early 16th century, most of the region was dominated by a Nahuatl-speaking people known as the Aztecs. The ruthless Aztecs were hated by the people they ruled. Thus, in 1519, when Hernán Cortés and a few hundred Spanish soldiers arrived in Mexico, they soon gained the support of many native Mexican groups. After the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was destroyed by the Spaniards and their Indian allies in 1521, Mexico City was built on the same Lake Island site. Mexico's Spanish conquerors were heirs of the Reconquista, the 800-year struggle between Christians and Muslims for control of the Iberian Peninsula. This crusading effort, culminating in the Christian conquest in 1492 of Granada, the last Spanish Muslim kingdom, had instilled generations of Spaniards with an ideal of warfare for gold, glory, and God. Although many who came to Mexico in the early 16th century primarily sought secular rewards, many missionary friars were intent on winning converts to Christianity. The friars' efforts may have been aided in 1531 by the Virgin Mary's reported appearance to an Indian convert. A church dedicated to the Virgin of Guadalupe was built at the site of the apparition on a hill near Mexico City. The Basilica of the Virgin of Guadalupe became the greatest pilgrimage shrine in the Americas. Here, where dances are still performed as religious offerings, a huge new church was built in the late 20th century. Although colonial period churchmen generally sought to protect the Indians from overexploitation, many Spanish colonists were more interested in native land and labor than in saving souls. During the 3-century Spanish colonial period, a wide gap separated the lifestyles of Mexico's small Hispanic upper class and the poor Indian and mestizo masses. The movement for independence from Spain, launched by Father Hidalgo in 1810, initially included a call for social justice. However, when independence was finally achieved in the early 1820s, the leaders of the new country were predominantly upper-class Mexicans of Spanish descent who had little interest in improving the lot of the landless masses. Several mid-19th century attempts at reform, including the laws promoted by Mexico's Zapotec Indian president, Benito Juarez, unintentionally worsened conditions for many Indian villagers who had formerly held some land as common property. 19th century Mexico was also plagued by wars, first with the United States and later with France. After General Porfirio Diaz imposed a dictatorship in 1876, conditions stabilized and the country achieved some prosperity. The vast majority of Mexicans, however, remained landless and desperately poor. Ultimately, the lack of a popular voice in government, the grossly uneven distribution of wealth, and numerous other factors led to the Mexican Revolution of 1910. The Mexican Revolution could never have fulfilled all of the promises made by its colorful leaders. But it did mark the beginning of profound changes in Mexican life. Land reform and literacy programs helped improve the lives of many farmers. The vigorous promotion of education has led to a much more literate citizenry. The rapid population growth, which has created its own problems, testifies to vast improvements in public health. Perhaps most important in a social psychological sense was the development of an intellectual and artistic respect for Mexico's Indian heritage. This was particularly important in a country where most people have at least some Indian ancestry. About 3/4 of the Mexican people are mestizos who have both Indian and European ancestors. Approximately 5% have an exclusively European heritage, and an estimated 20% are descended from the country's pre-Hispanic Indian peoples with little or no European admixture. Of these, however, only about 1/3 speak a native language and are thought of as Indians in a cultural sense. Although many upper-class Mexicans are of predominantly Spanish descent and some remote culturally Indian villages are very poor, ancestry alone is neither a guarantee of success nor a major barrier to achievement. Regardless of ancestry, the vast majority of people in the country value their nation's indigenous and Hispanic heritage and think of themselves as Mexicans rather than Indians or Spaniards. In several parts of Mexico, however, some relatively small, often isolated communities maintain Indian languages and lifestyles. Although these communities are most numerous in the central and southern parts of the country, several northern groups have also maintained aspects of their traditions. More than 40 different languages are spoken by the approximately 6 million people who still use a native tongue. Many of these are spoken by only a few people living in a fairly small area, such as the Lacandon of the Chiapas rainforest. In contrast, Nahuatl, the Aztec language, is used by about 1.5 million people, mostly in east-central Mexican villages. Mayan customs remain vital in the Yucatan Peninsula, where the language is spoken by about 700,000 people. Other sizable native linguistic groups include the Zapotecs and Mixtecs of Oaxaca State, the Otomi of the Mesa Central, and the Tarascans of Michoacan. The relationship between people who have remained cultural Indians and those who have largely acculturated to Mexican norms is highly complex. For example, the people of Angawan in Michoacan State still speak the Tarascan Indian language, preserve traditional forms of housing, dress, and social behavior, and describe themselves as Tarascans. Their colorful fiestas are celebrated with traditional dances. In contrast, most people in many nearby communities speak Spanish, wear modern dress, and think of themselves as Mexicans with a Tarascan heritage. On festival days, they still celebrate this heritage with traditional songs and dances. Elsewhere in the country, Spanish-speaking Mexicans preserve colorful indigenous fiesta costumes and dances as part of their regional traditions. These frequently modernized versions of Indian and colonial peasant costumes and customs are a colorful part of Mexico's fascinating regional differences. These differences originated in the past when regions separated by mountains were almost like different countries and constituted an individual's patria chica, or little country. Even today, each region not only has its distinctive costumes, songs, and dances, but also its craft specialties and its favorite foods. The northern states are noted for their distinctive frontier ranching culture and a norteño music that emphasizes two-step rhythms. Central Western Jalisco State takes credit for the vibrant music of mariachi bands. Its folk dances are especially colorful. Coastal Veracruz is the homeland of fast-paced, hot country dances and the spectacular Totonac flying pole dance. The hand-carved and lacquered wooden masks used in Michoacan's colorful fiesta dances are magnificent works of folk art. This central western state is particularly noted for its varied handicraft traditions. The Talavera tiles manufactured in Puebla and the elaborate pottery ornaments made in the state of Mexico represent some of the craft variety found in Mexico's central region. Oaxaca is another region particularly noted for its craft traditions. Gold and silver workers in Oaxaca City produce fine jewelry. The weavers of serapes and wall hangings in Teotitlan del Valle use designs as old as the stonework at the Mixtec Temple city of Mitla, or as fashionable as the town's intercontinental market demands. In nearby Coyotepec, the black pottery made world famous by Doña Rosa is still made by her son and his sons. Doña Rosa's tiny great-granddaughter, Rosita, is learning the craft in a time-honored manner. Thus, these crafts and other regional traditions thrive in a modern world. In addition to urban, rural, and regional differences, Mexican lifestyles vary greatly depending on social class and income. Unemployment, underemployment, and the poverty of many people who are too old or ill to work are problems, especially in urban areas. In contrast with the past, however, a substantial proportion of Mexicans are neither very rich nor extremely poor. These people consider themselves part of a middle class that values hard work and education. Ambitious young people study hard because they see education as an important route to a better job and increased social status. However, as in other countries, Mexican teenagers like to have fun as well as study. After they complete school, most Mexican young people go to work, but usually remain at home with their families until marriage. Money from their jobs helps support the family, a central pivot of middle-class Mexican life. Weddings, which unite young couples and establish bonds between two kinship networks, are especially important occasions. In choosing a mate, young people today have far more freedom than in the past, when courtships were rigidly controlled by older family members. The Roman Catholic faith remains important for many Mexicans. Mass on Sunday mornings is often followed by a family outing. Musicians may be hired to play for special occasions. A song by a strolling young guitarist or a serenade by a trio add greatly to the ambiance of a meal or a party. For some Mexicans, the Fiesta Brava or bullfight provides the highlight of Sunday afternoon entertainment. Throughout the year, there are special occasions when everyone celebrates. Christmas, called La Navidad, is an annual highlight. Piñatas are sold in the markets for weeks in advance. Manger scenes, called nacimientos, decorate each church and home. Mexicans have also enthusiastically adopted Christmas trees and Santa Claus from their North American neighbors. Carnival time in February or March is an occasion for exuberant masked dances. Holy Week before Easter is celebrated with solemn religious rituals. The Easter season is also a favorite time for family vacations. Most of Mexico's beach resorts are crowded during the week between Palm Sunday and Easter. Fireworks explode on Cinco de Mayo and Dia de Independencia, both patriotic holidays. One of Mexico's most interesting holidays, the Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is celebrated on November 2nd. Colorful markets display candy skulls and other things used for the occasion. Elaborate tables are set for the deceased members of the family. In some central Mexican communities, children carrying a coffin parade through the streets seeking treats. On the 2nd of November, people all over Mexico gather at cemeteries to decorate the graves. This is a somber yet joyous occasion because many believe that the souls of the dead are especially present at this time to join in the festivities. December 12th is celebrated as the Day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, patroness of Mexico. In addition to these nationwide holidays, each town, village, and urban neighborhood celebrates its special Saints' Day fiesta. Because these events are essentially religious, they often begin with a mass. Religious processions and traditional dances are often offered as expressions of religious devotion. In addition, these fiestas typically feature carnival rides and colorful markets. An abundance of food and music adds to the festivities. Thus, the local fiestas are an important part of Mexico's special spirit of La Vida, life lived to the fullest.